Hi, everybody. Welcome to Social Media, the Law and Good Sense. Social media, Facebook turned 18 this year. So you probably know a world in which social media, you probably don't know a world in which social media doesn't exist. And there's no question that social media has really given us superpowers, as I call it. It really has been such an enabler. It has been really empowering, both in our sort of professional life, in our study life, and of course in our personal life. So as I say, it has made superheroes and given us superpowers. The thing about it is, and to misquote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. I don't even think it actually was Spider-Man. I think it was his uncle, the uncle that actually was shot by was killed by the bad guy. But apparently, anyway, it's from Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. So the wonderful tools that we have at our disposal, through social media, is they can do great things for us and they can be a real power for good. But as I say, worth bearing in mind, with great power comes great responsibility. So what are the potential pitfalls? Look, the idea of this is not to turn people off from using social media, because that's certainly not. As a digital marketing consultant, my job is actually to encourage people to use the tools at their disposal. And it will come as no surprise to you that social media is a very, very important one of those tools in our marketing and our personal branding. And that's an important thing to bear in mind, is our personal branding. So the idea is not to say turn people off or put people off or scare people off, but really to use social media in a responsible way that isn't going to come back and bite you whenever you least expect it. So what are the sorts of things we need to, what are the pitfalls, what are the sorts of things we need to be careful about? Thinking twice. Think twice, always think twice. You know, there's that whole joke I saw in my Facebook feed a few days ago. It was one of those, it was a Facebook memory from a few years ago. And on it, somebody had posted, a little meme. Facebook thought it was a very good time to post this. You know that you've had a few too many drinks or whatever, and Facebook, it was such a bad idea. So it is the thinking twice. But some of the mistakes that we might make are fun. Okay, and we go, oh my goodness, did I really post that? And some of them can really be very, very incriminating, and that just simply don't go away. So what I would say to you is that one of the big things is think twice. Think twice before you post or share. And I'm going to, as a fairly loaded point whenever I talk about the share bit. So by and large, okay, apart from the obvious things that you shouldn't do whenever you've been out in filthies for the night, those just don't do that. Just don't post some of those things. But look, in the normal run of things, before we post something, think about it, okay, and before we share something, what's the source of that? Where did that information come from? Who was is it somebody that we could trust? Is it somebody reliable? Is it somebody credible? What type of content do they normally, what type of stuff? There's that word content. I mean, my next session today is around content marketing. What type of stuff do they normally produce and share and engage with? And of course, is what you're sharing or posting relevant? Okay, so look, we're going to talk in a fair bit of detail about these things, but credibility, and this is so important whenever it comes to sharing content. And there's a whole bunch of things that you really need to be very, very careful about whenever you're sharing stuff. And as I say, that will become, I think, fairly obvious as we work through it. Okay, one of the things we need to be careful about is perpetuating what we call fake news. And it's been a while since we actually probably heard that term. Fake news, and I wonder why. The guy on the right had a lot to do with everything was fake news this and fake news that. But look, on a serious note, it's very, very easy for us to perpetuate, as I say, stuff that is basically either disingenuous, misinformation, disinformation, clearly wrong, etc., etc. So here's some examples. Okay, a couple of years ago now, it's over a couple of years, is that everybody, I suppose that's a bit of a big grand statement, Damien, is that the media got very excited, shall we say, about the return to the high street of Woolworths. Okay, so Woolworths was a much loved brand. I'm sure you probably remember it well. a much loved brand that sadly disappeared from our high street a few years ago. So we had all of this, we had all of a sudden a couple of years ago, we had the likes of the Mirror, Woolworths is coming back to the high street, the physical stores opening next year. Boom, that's the Mirror. The Sun, Woolworths is coming back to the high streets, UK high streets next year. Oh, how amazing is all of this, you know. The problem was, it was nonsense. This guy here, Tom Witherow, went off and he did his own exploration. By this stage, it was really across all of the media, and he thought every major online outlet has reported that Woolworths is returning to the high street. It's not. It's not. So this was actually a couple of things about this. First of all, it was nonsense, and depends on how you read this and depends on who you believe. Apparently, it was students with some sort of experiment or some sort of social experiment. But the point was, it was very, very easy for this to catch fire. And it was very, very easy for this, effectively, this nonsense to be perpetuated. Because guess what happens? Look at the bottom. You get all of these sort of shares and so on, you know. So that's the thing about social media. It takes on a life of its own. I don't really want to talk about viral, but you know what I mean. It does start to take on life of its own. So it's very, very easy to perpetuate or to amplify or to give airtime for stuff that isn't true, you know. So that was a really a nice sort of universal one. You would think if you were those media outlets such as the Mail, the Sun, Star, whatever, blah blah blah, is you'd go off and do your verify it. You'd go off and do your homework rather than just get into that what I call the echo chamber. So it's a fairly harmless one, but there are other there are other pitfalls. I love this. This is a parody account for TransLink. So I was a regular user of the pink buses right up until the pandemic, and we all love to hate public transport, and very often, you know, I was given off about, oh, where's the 6A today, and blah blah blah, you know. And this was actually, to all intents and purposes, it looked like a real thing. This looked like TransLink PR's Twitter account. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore. Thing was, it was a parody. You know, so it would have been very, very easy to sort of piggyback and to use the mentioned TransLink PR here for that only to be nonsense. It was a really nice, fun parody account anyway, because you had things like, for example, you would have had a picture of a beautiful blue sky with a tiny little cloud in it, and then TransLink apologising because of the weather that the 6A, the 7A, and the 8A wouldn't run today, you know, that sort of nonsense. But it was really good fun. But it was very, very easy to sort of, you know, to think that was the real TransLink PR account. And I can tell you, that's not the Queen's account. That's not the Queen's Twitter account. As you can see, that she probably isn't promoting Gin O'Clock or Still Raining. So it is very, very much a satire account. So look, there's a bunch of, there's some that actually that are very, very, very easy to, I wonder if do I have it here? Yeah, that's a parody account. That looks like the real thing. To all intents and purposes in the face of it, it looks like the real thing. It's not. It's actually a parody account, you know. And I've seen actually people getting very, very animated by some of the stuff that has been posted on this parody account by Ian Pearley Jr., thinking, oh, he's no right to say it and all the rest of it. And people having to point out to him, here, hold on, look, this is actually a bit of crack. This is a parody account. But very, very easy. I mean, to if you were to say, well, not that you, well, I don't know, is it's very, very easy if you want to tag Ian Paisley Jr. in a post. It would be very, very easy to post or to you know, to mention him using that at mention. Even Elon Musk has one, of course he would. So it's at board Elon Musk. You know, look, there's all of these out there, but look, the point is, I think be very, very careful. And I've fallen into the trap, not so much necessarily with parody accounts. If I have wanted to mention somebody, to mention somebody in a post, say in a tweet, say, I found that actually I've at mentioned, and it's not even there. It's not even the right at mention at all. Or it's not even the right handle. Is the word I'm looking for. Even it's not even the right handle at all. It very often is someone who's just hijacked it or whatever. So the point is, is be careful, around amplifying content. Where does it come from? Was it from a party account? Be careful whenever you're tagging stuff at mentioning, I should say, is that you're not. Is there a screen delay? What you should see board Elon. Are we seeing board Elon?
It's okay for me, Damien. I'm not sure. That little comment has come in just from a watch party up in Coleraine, but I think it's fine. Okay. It's maybe just their connection on the campus.
No, I think everybody's seeing it. Just getting confirmation. That's fine. Yeah. Thank you, Laura.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Look, we're going to talk now, and look, please don't everybody lose the will here. Look, as I say at the beginning, yes, thanks everybody for confirming. It is reassuring. Going to talk about social media and the law. Okay, look, I'm not a lawyer. There you go. Spoiler alert and stall set out and all the rest of it. I am not a lawyer. But what I do know is that we need to understand a little bit about the law whenever we are using social media. Okay, because there are some really, really nasty sort of pitfalls that we can fall into. Look, I think it's safe to say is that by and large, the things that exist in real life, in other words, in three-dimensional life, such as offences against the person, protection from harassment, malicious comms, legislation relating to racial, religious, disability, sexual orientation, transgender, all of those things, they apply in three-dimensional life, they apply in virtual life, pretty much by and large. So that's really one thing to bear in mind is very much that the law on the street pretty much is the same as the law inside our phones or in our laptops or our tablets or whatever. So a few things before we move through that, okay? This is a quote from George Bernard Shaw that is very, look, this is one of the things that social media that really bugs me so much and is beware of false knowledge. It is more dangerous than ignorance. What do I mean by that? Okay. Before we get into the law side of things, always remember that social media, and I've talked about this already, is about that perpetuating nonsense. We had a fairly innocuous example there with the Woolworths. That wasn't going to do any harm. Wasn't going to do us any harm. But think about what's happened this last 2 years, what we've gone through this last 2 years, is that there has been a lot of nonsense out there. But before I get to that example, before we get into the sort of the dangerous stuff, one of the hats that I wear as a digital marketing consultant, and with my background in advertising, is I work with ad agencies on developing communication strategies. So I was doing some research, this is maybe 2-3 years ago, with an ad agency in Belfast, who was working on behalf of, they were doing a pitch, they were submitting a tender to the government, to do a campaign regarding, an advertising campaign regarding universal credit. So as the strategy person, as the person who was actually going to write the strategy for this communications campaign, I joined a number of Facebook groups because I wanted to hear what sort of things that people were actually saying. I really wanted to try and understand what the knowledge gaps were, because we didn't have communications campaigns, and what happens in the absence of the right way of things is that people will fill that void effectively with bunkum, with nonsense, whether that's deliberately disinformation or it's just simply wrong. So look, what I have here, in order to understand what sort of conversations were happening in social media, specifically Facebook it was, I joined a number of groups, Facebook groups, which were set up by communities around the subject of universal credit. So this is the sort of thing that I saw. These are verbatims from that work. So you see I've highlighted this stuff here that's that bit I'm most interested in. Whenever you see people talking about my understanding is, or I must point out I don't work in this field, so it's purely from my own research. But I think, have I read this right? I think, I would guess, I guess. All of this here. Now, what you have here, think about what was happening here. You've got fairly big communities. In other words, these Facebook groups very often had thousands of people in them. So you had somebody with a real life scenario, who's found himself out of work or with a disability or whatever, really wanted to try and understand what they were entitled, to, or whatever. And with all, we had these sort of armchair bandits, as it were, these people like us, who probably don't know very much about it, going, oh, yeah, my granny. Oh, yeah, okay, my son. Oh, I think, I would guess, have you read this? I'm not an expert, but. And before you know it, they have all of these people who have, it's the blind leading the blind, effectively. Yet all of these people effectively then given their tuppence worth, the tuppence worth on trying to solve other people's real life big problems, around universal credit. What this did allow me to do, I think that's maybe the end. Yes, what that did allow me to do though was, so I was able as a communication strategist to go, okay, there's all of these questions. These are the sorts of questions that are being asked within these groups. And maybe well-intended, some people are trying to provide solutions or answers to those questions. But what it did illustrate was knowledge gaps. So as part of the campaign, and just to give you a good insight into what the benefit of this was, what this allowed me to do, was to suggest to the government department, the Department for Communities as it is, to say, look, there are some serious knowledge gaps out there regarding this and that and the other, okay? And in the absence of putting them to right, as it were, what's happening is that people are filling that information gap, that knowledge gap, with effectively nonsense. So it would be good to get some content. There's the C word again. It would be really good to get some informational content that would actually explain these things, the processes, for example, claiming universal credit and a number of other things. So what the department in the end did do was they created a series of little videos that sought to sort of myth bust, as it were, to sort of dispel all of the myths and to sort of try and break through that barrier of nonsense that was being amplified in social media. But I talked about, that's an awful chart, but let me just explain what it is. There was some really nice research done, and I haven't looked at research since, about social media and COVID. Okay, so yes, beginning of start of 2020, really, pretty much really from the get-go, COVID was a thing. Okay, so it wasn't until March 2020 that we went into lockdown and so on. But what was very, very interesting was there was some nice research done about the sorts of content that was firing about, that was echoing around social media in relation to COVID. Okay, the thing was, okay, look at that. There was stuff that was regarded as misleading content, stuff that was regarded as false content, stuff that was actually totally made up. So there was a lot of stuff, and remember that. I mean, there was everything from the 5G, and look, I'm not going to get into debate, conspiracy theory debate here. It's not the place, but there was all of this stuff. And I remember actually the time the BBC and they created some nice little video content around myth busting again. So and in kind of response to all of this, I'm going to use the word crap because it pretty much was, to all of this stuff, this harmful stuff. This was harmful stuff. There was even right down to, so if I take garlic every night, I'm making that up, by the way, but I think garlic did get a mention, or if I stand on my head and break dance, that means I won't get COVID. There was all of these I made that one up as well, can't you guess? So, but all of this potentially harmful stuff, we even remember, the sorts of things. Drink disinfectants, thank you. Yes, drink disinfectant was one. Donald Trump actually perpetuated that. The bleach and all the rest of it. Oh my goodness. So look, that's all harmful stuff. It really is harmful. So it's really important that we recognize that social media can become, around certain things, really a big echo chamber of misinformation, which is maybe well intended. Okay, the difference between mis and disinformation just is that misinformation is not necessarily disingenuous. disinformation is. It's usually deliberately fabricated or misleading. So look, always remember that. Always bear that in mind. That just because it used to be, it used to be back in the day before all of this here. If it was in the newspaper, it must be true. I write. So if it's on social media, it must be true. I write. So what sort of banana skins can we find ourselves in whenever it comes to social media and the law? Okay, not too many, thankfully, but some. Okay, the number one perhaps banana skin that we could fall foul of within social media is defamation. Okay, that sounds very, very, it really is, in other words, defaming somebody's good reputation. And here's the thing, they don't even need to be named. The person doesn't even need to be named under the Defamation Act of 2013, just identifiable. Let me give you an example, a real life example. In 2012, 10 years ago, this poor man here was, there was an inference, you call him Lord McAlpine. Lord McAlpine, there was an inference that this poor man was guilty of child sex abuse. That's a pretty heavy allegation. And part of the origination of this here was social media. So we had a very, very important case, a very, very big, high-profile legal case called McAlpine versus Barco. Sally Barco is actually the wife of the Speaker, the then, or of a former Speaker of the House called John Barco. She had tweeted, actually, is why is Lord McAlpine trending? And she said, and then innocent face. So the putting that innocent face there suggests there's like, she's actually go, what's that? In other words, there's an inference there. She's actually inferring something. Why is Lord McAlpine trending innocent face? Now, cut to a court case whereby, look, I've short-circuited this because I haven't got all day to talk about this, nor do you want to listen to the ins and outs of it. Cut a long story very short, there was a court case, and BBC was fined 185,000. ITV was fined 125,000. Here's the thing, and this is the bit that concerns you guys, is that Twitter followers who had under 500 followers, who had been guilty of perpetuating content around Lord McAlpine, they were asked to give a £25 charity donation, and those Twitter followers, people who had Twitter followers with more than 500 followers, they went after them, okay? And the QI panelist Alan Davies fined £15,000. So a very, very bad day at the office. On the subject of Alan Davies, I wanted to show a picture of him, but because I wanted to show you another banana skin that we can very, very easily fall into. I'm going a little bit off piste with this, but it's important all the same. As you can see there that I've used a picture of Alan from a while ago, and you can see I've quoted the source on it. It's okay for me to use this image. And the reason it's okay, because it's common. There's no, the cop is not, nobody's going to sue me for using this image. I have a real life example of, and please bear this in mind, I have a real life example of a client in Belfast who received an email bill from a photographer in Belfast saying, you've used an image of one of my images on your website that you didn't have permission to, and here's a bill for $2,500. I kid you not. And the truth of it is that was correct. I'm not going to get into the whole background. $2,500, 2,000, and because of what I do, I was actually asked to, well, look, Damien, could you please speak with our solicitors about this? And I did. And here's a coincidence of coincidences, is that I spoke with the solicitor and says, this is very interesting because we have previously represented a business against this same guy, this same photographer. And it went to court, okay, and it was for £7,000 or £9,000, I can't remember what it was, and he won. And if he goes to court this time, he'll win, because the law comes down very, very heavily on people's intellectual property. So anyway, we settled out of court, gave him £2,000, told him where to go, and off he went with his £2,000. Now, you could argue that this photographer person, I've heard subsequent stories of what I believe could be the same photographer, is that it is very disingenuous. He was clearly making probably more money out of suing people or threatening to sue people for using his image or images than he was selling his image or images. So what's my big message to you here? If you need to use an image of something in social or in, that's a good, yes, it's a very, yes, it's a very good business model indeed. I'd say there was 2 instances where he's really scooped the better part of 10 grand, you know, just by dropping a couple of emails out. So yeah, look, if you are going to use images, there are a bunch of places you can go for good quality, what we call stock library images. I know I'm going a little bit off piece here, but I mean, it's so important that intellectual property is a very, very important thing whenever it comes to social media. Pixabay is one library, Pixabiy, Unsplash, just that, unsplash.com, and Pexels, Pexels.com are really good places for images. Pixabay, there it is, Pixabay.com and Unsplash.com and Pexels.com. Pixabay and Pexels also have got stock video, and Unsplash has, I think it's just images. But you'll get, with a little bit of creative thinking, pretty much everything I've used here, from those silly wee Supermen and at the beginning, the Wonder Woman, was I've got them from one of those sources, so I can you know, show them here with in the knowledge that nobody's going to sue me. Yeah. So yeah, you need to be sometimes a little bit creative in your thinking about, you know, what sort of searches and so on. But I'll move on here. The law. Twitter is not just a close. So the barrister acting for Lord McAlpine, Twitter is not just a closed coffee shop amongst friends. There you go. It goes out to hundreds of thousands, millions actually, and you must take responsibility for it. So it's not just a bit of bant between friends. Here's the thing, and this is the so important bit for you. I've probably laboured the point here, but the big thing here is what we call the repetition rule. It is not, there's no defence for you to say, I was only sharing that, because that is the repetition. No defence to an action for defamation for the defendant to prove that he or she was only repeating what someone else had said. So you can see there the real danger of just firing something on and say, oh no, I didn't say it wasn't me, I was really just sharing it. Not good enough, not good enough. There's also a thing called we call the innuendo meaning. So it's a meaning implied. So there was a suggestion, if you recall, and this was the judge, by the way, from Sally Barker's post about innocent face. There was a suggestion, there was an innuendo, so a very harmful innuendo there. We had this actually as well recently. Whatever was in this guy's mind, I have no idea. Dr. Kristen Jensen, as you know, was sued for 125 grand plus costs for throwing Arlene Foster under a bus back early summer of last year. So caution needed. And look, you guys will remember this from 4 years ago. 4 years ago coming up was remember the case, the court case about the rugby guys, the Ulster rugby guys here? That was fraught with, it was absolutely fraught with social media pitfalls. One was, I mean, for example, here's one. This was actually a senator in the Irish Senate. He actually had to apologise on Twitter for suggesting that the defendants, is that the right term? Either Paddy Jackson, of course, there it is there, and the other guys, he basically says, oh, the privileged, you know, middle class, blah, 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 you know. So he actually was forced to apologise very, very publicly. But there was a whole lot of other stuff around that case. Was there was a man accused of naming the woman involved. I get confused between the defendant and the whatever's, you know. So there was another example, and that was in social media. So that we had, and of course, if you bear in mind how the whole thing came to be in the first place, was guess what? WhatsApp. And all of that evidence about what these guys were, you know, the bant between them, so-called bant between them about what had happened. So social media was really is throughout that entire case. So you can see that there was a few banana skins in there to be really, really careful about. And then, of course, we had as part of just to square the circle on that. Whenever I think that they were acquitted, as it were, then there was a campaign, another campaign around hashtag I believe her. And so look, if you're ever looking for a good, and someday maybe somebody has done this, a really good case study around social media and the pitfalls of social media in relation to the law. I mean, literally the law in this case. It's a very good one. It's a very, very good one about how many people sort of fell foul of it. I've talked about, Alan, I'm not talking, there's, what do you call it? Oh, yes, what not to do. Don't go into, whenever you're looking for an image of something, just don't go into Google Images. I think if I haven't said that, I'm not sure I said those words. I've suggested where you can go. Where you can't go is Google Images, by and large, because it's somebody's, and they could very well. If you can actually track, you can track, you can search, you can do an image search. So that means that someone can search for the image and they can actually see where all that image appears. So they can go after you. So yes, there's those again. Sorry, I meant to share those earlier. So Pixabay and Splash Pixels, amongst others. So the big point here, and to go back to this Lord McAlpine example, is it doesn't have to be original. You don't have to be the person who actually is originating it. You can be liable. Okay, is the right word here. Merely by perpetuating it, in other words, by firing it on, firing it over the hedge, retweeting it, resharing it, whatever you want to call it, whatever. So, and it's not good enough to say that retweets aren't an endorsement, because by and large they probably are. And disclaimers are while disclaimers are useful, don't over rely on them. Don't rely on them to protect you, because ultimately what you say on social media, by and large, is your responsibility. And that responsibility extends to protecting the uni. It extends to protecting, future employers or current employers. It does, and I would do quite a lot of training with organisations, around the subject of sometimes. I'll not get into it, but sometimes you get loose cannons within organisations who, within large organisations, within sometimes very public-facing organisations, who can be loose cannons and can really undermine through social media the integrity of a brand. So, but of course, as students, you will recognise that there is a thing called free speech. Okay, and free speech does exist, of course, thank goodness it is there, but hey, free speech comes with limitations such as things that are, in interest of public safety, disordered crime, health and morals, reputation. There it is again, the reputation and rights of others. And of course, is confidentiality. And protecting the disclosure of information. So there is that copyright thing in there. We'll talk again, data protection, all of those protocols that exist in three-dimensional worlds and flesh and blood worlds exist within two-dimensional world as well as social media. So that's the heavy stuff behind, okay? Pretty much the heavy stuff anyway. It depends, define heavy. Is that so if you can summarize the law, just be really, really careful about sending something on that could really come back and bite you. But very often with social media, it's not about the law, it's good sense, okay? And in other words, did we really mean to say that? And that's very often, that's a big banana skin that any of us can really slip up on, is did we really mean to say that? Because, and you know yourself, there's a really nice skit that I've seen, or a really nice sketch that I've seen on YouTube, and it's two guys misinterpreting text messaging, and just because of the tone of it, but they're completely taking it the wrong way. It's full of swear words, or would have included it, but the university wouldn't thank me for that. So it really, things can lose in translation. They really can. It's happened to you. It certainly happened to me. So it's very, very easy to take things the wrong way, okay, sometimes without context. There you go. I'm putting that out there. So this is me firing a grenade and walking away from it. No, I'm not. Okay, this is real. You may recall this story. It's from from this time last year. And Burger King, in their wisdom, they tweeted out, "Women belong in the kitchen." Now, you can imagine, hello, look at that. You can imagine that caught fire. And of course, Burger King were thrown properly under a bus for it. I don't know how much you know about it, but there is context to it. And I'm not justifying it, but if you were to understand the context, and the context was this: Burger King run an academy to train females to work in the industry. And this was actually a promotional content for their academy. So really what they were actually doing was that was a positive thing, if you think. So they were creating these opportunities to bring more females into the industry. So you could say that the intention was good, and probably the academy intention is good, but it showed a distinct lack of judgment to say that women belong in the kitchen. Okay, particularly whenever there is no context for that, and there was no context. They ended up deleting it and apologizing, of course, as you know. An absolute spectacular fail. Okay, what else have we got? So Burger King, we hear you. We got our initial tweet wrong, and we're sorry. Our aim was to draw attention to the fact that only 20% of professional chefs in UK kitchens are women, and to help change that by awarding culinary scholarships. We will do better next time. And of course, we decided to delete the original tweet after our apology. It was brought to our attention that there were abusive comments in the thread, which there were, and we don't want to leave the space open for that. So, spectacular fail. This didn't go down terribly well either from 2 or 3 years ago. Sunny Delight, Sunny D, you know the stuff that makes you go orange if you drink it. I can't do this anymore. They had a whole campaign around, I can't go on, I can't do this anymore. Now think about the implications of that for, against the context, against the backdrop of mental health. They were properly castigated for that campaign, and of course it was another fail. This is mental. So a few years ago, you may be familiar, and there was a Mark Wahlberg film, which was a really good film about the Boston Marathon bombing. Okay, so there was indeed a bomb, a terrorist activated a bomb at the Boston Marathon. And in their wisdom, I kid you not, this is like a few years later, Adidas had tweeted out, is it Twitter? Yeah, it is. Tweeted out, congrats. Somebody's actually dropped a note and says, there's no such thing as bad publicity. Yeah, I hear you. I think it was Angie. The message has disappeared now. Yeah, possibly, but I'm not sure. I don't know what's happening. Think about to answer that one. Think about what's happening with P&O at the moment. That's bad publicity. That's bad publicity. But look at this one here. Is that congrats? This was like from Adidas. Congrats, you survived the Boston Marathon. And it's like, right, you can see that somebody has actually picked up on it and gone and says, Adidas, you may want to think you, well, that's it. It's how these things make their way through the filters is a very good point made by a contributor there. Is you may want to rethink the subject line. Of course, how insensitive is that? Given the terrorist attack a few years ago. So yeah, a bit of a fail for sure. These are silly. You can imagine. This was Aldi in Australia. So I became an Aldi lover or Aldi lover when I tasted. You can imagine how much fun, how much naughty fun people would have had with that campaign. Be very, 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 very careful what you wish for whenever you're leaving, whenever you're democratizing, whenever you're opening the floor, whenever you're giving people an opportunity to take part in your to engage with your content. This is my favorite, perhaps of all time. So what we have here is an image of Han Solo and Princess Leia. I kid you not, that's real. So Cinnabon is a place. They make cinnamon swirls. Carrie Fisher, the woman who played Princess Leia, R.I.P. Carrie Fisher. You'll always have the best buns in the galaxy. I mean, WTF. Spectacular. You know, if ever there was one. It's crass. It's insensitive. It was shooting yourself in the foot. So look, always think and think again, because it doesn't go away. It's very, very hard. Once these things are laid down, you know, it's not easy to rub them out. They are pretty much in an indelible sort of ink, as it were, you know. And sometimes with these campaigns, I think the Aldi one was an example of that, but would you see this? I mean, these are spectacular fails as well. So we have one of my favorites is this, is be careful what you wish for. So McDonald's, in their wisdom a few years ago, you can see how long ago it is because you can see even the look of that, it looks old. McDonald's, in their wisdom, decided to have a campaign, a hashtag campaign around hashtag McD stories. In other words, you can see that how that meeting went in McDonald's and their agency. I know what we'll do a social media campaign encouraging people to submit their stories or, you know, around their fond memories of McDonald's. My father used to bring us to McDonald's as a reward when we were kids. Now he's horribly obese and has diabetes. Lesson learned, hashtag McD stories, and so on and so forth. Be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for. But this is spectacular. This is from, again, from a while ago. So the New York Police Department, NYPD, in their wisdom, wisdom, do you have a photo with a member of the NYPD? Hey, tweet us and tag hashtag my NYPD. It may be featured on our Facebook. Guess what happened? Yep, lots of photographs. Not the sort of photographs that were particularly becoming to the NYPD. So you can imagine that opened up a whole opportunity for people to jump on. These are all top pictures when you search for NYPD, my NYPD. You really, yes, you think that you should have really have seen it coming. Yes, you should. So you all really didn't think this through, did you? No, you did not indeed. Very much. So one of the things we're going to look at is the next thing I'm going to talk about is how we can manage engagement. Okay, so that's about what we can do whenever we're the things that we cannot do, I should say, whenever we are at the controls. But imagine that we have our own social media assets. And I'm really looking at this really from a business point of view. I'm really not so much talking about it is I don't engage. I think don't engage is probably yeah, it's don't engage. Not engaging it probably defeats the purpose of social media, of course. So how can we manage engagement? You know, monitoring. I talk about 3 M's: monitoring, moderation, and management. So hold this thought for a second. Is that you can even be, in some circumstances, be held responsible for other people's defamatory comments. So really important that you have protocols or processes or procedures. I don't like all those words, you know what I mean? You have something in place to actually help mitigate against falling foul of you know, of what other people are saying. Look, this is very much really the sorts of organisations that this can happen is usually public-facing organisations, such as the uni, you know, but also, you know, the likes of public sector, you know, government departments and so on. Is that very often they can fall foul of you know, negative commentary. But fortunately, and we'll talk about this in a wee second, is that we need to be careful as well. Here are some spectacular examples of whenever the wrong people have got, shall we say, at the controls. So HMV, you remember HMV, still there, is that they were employing, or they were unemployed. In other words, they were actually paying a lot of people off. And some disgruntled employee got control of got his hands or her hands in the controls and used it as an opportunity to actually say very unflattering things about the brand. There are over 60 of us being fired at once. Mass execution of loyal employees who love the brand. Could you imagine? Could you imagine? You know, so there was a British company, HMV. Yes, soon to be former employees took the opportunity to live tweet the 60 plus. So yeah, I mean that's not good for the brand. One of my favorites. So I don't know how much you know about Chrysler. I guess you know it's a car brand, of course it is. And Detroit, which is in the States, of course, used to be known as Motor City because it really was the center of the car building what's the word, industry in the States. Now, this is someone who clearly in their day job actually manages the Chrysler Autos account in obviously in day job, but they seem to forget that I find it ironic that Detroit is known as the hashtag Motor City, and yet no one here knows how to F and drive. Love the Brit, honestly, yes, absolutely. The problem was that person probably thought that they were tweeting as them, as Damien, rather than the admin of Chrysler Autos. So that was a spectacular fail. They were probably taken off that, taken away from the controls fairly quickly. So just make sure that you are. I mean, it's funny. I admin to a number of social media channels. Yeah, I need to make damn sure that that I'm using the right channel, you know, for what I'm saying. And look, this sort of stuff here. Oh my word. OMG, I hate my job. My boss is a total pervert. Always making me do shit stuff, just etc., etc., etc. The boss saw it. Firstly, don't flatter yourself. Secondly, you've worked here for 5 months and didn't work out that I'm gay. I know I don't prance around the office like a queen, but it's not exactly a secret. Thirdly, that shit stuff is called your job. You know what I pay you to do. But the fact that you seem able to F up the simplest of tasks might contribute to how you feel about it. And lastly, you also seem to have forgotten that you have 2 weeks left in your 6-month trial period. Don't bother coming in tomorrow. I'll pop your P45 in the post and you can come in whenever you like to pick up any stuff you left here. And yes, I'm serious. Bad day at the office. One thing not to do within social media is to get into a bun fight. Okay, and I see this businesses, you know, for example, you're a restaurant and you run a Facebook page or Instagram or whatever. Let's take the Facebook, and somebody says, you know, I was in your restaurant last night and it was absolutely awful. Oh, that's not good. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody really wants to see that. But the thing not to do there is it's very, very easy for us to get very defensive and to jump into what I call a bun fight. I have never seen anybody win, I've never seen a business win a bun fight on social media. Instead, take it offline. Okay, the most spectacular, if anybody's ever watched Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, there was this is regarded as the ultimate social media meltdown. I did see the episode, Amy's Baking Company, and I think they still remain the only business. You know, Gordon Ramsay goes in, tries to troubleshoot, and helps them turn the business around, and so on. I think this is the only business that Ramsay walked away from because they were beyond redemption. But these ones, the Amy's Baking Company, they took to Twitter because a Kitchen Nightmares graphic. Yes, it was Holly. What we have here is people were taking to social media, you know, and talking about them, as it were. But rather than sort of keep the head up, they absolutely lost it. They had a meltdown. You are all little punks. Nothing. You are all nothing. We are laughing at you. All of you just fools. We have God on our side. You just have your sights. I am Wonder Woman. I have a great wife and a great mom to my kids, and we'll be parents to a human kid. One day we will show all of you. Ultimate meltdown. Just check it out. So take it offline. If someone has a grievance, take it offline and take it offline and fast. Okay, do not get into your bun fight. So I talked earlier on about moderation, management and moderation. Thankfully, whenever we're at the head of the controls, is that we can do certain things to manage and mitigate and moderate what sort of content. For example, On Facebook, if you go into your privacy and settings, we can go across and we can decide who actually engages with our content. Now, I'm not great about this. I'm not a big fan of this, because you put yourself out there, you got to take, the rough with the smooth, I guess. The sorts of circumstances this would be used would be, I need to watch some time here. I'm nearly done. The sorts of things we need to be careful about is government departments, whenever it's about information, they just want to use social media to distribute information rather than actually engage with it. So you can actually do your settings. In Twitter, you can also you can reply. Everyone, people you know are only people you mention, and trolls. Just a brief. I'm going to take about 2 more minutes because I know the session meant to finish at 12:15. Trolls. Okay, these are real. Probably not going to be real for you, but they could be in a future business. Ignore them, block them, report them. That's pretty much that in a nutshell. How do you block people? In Facebook, you can go to your settings and block individuals. You can, in Twitter, go to your 3 little dots and go to the account, block them. On Instagram, go to the account and block them. Here's one for you. I'm nearly finished here. Is Eminem, okay? The wonderful artist that is Eminem. One of the songs he did from probably 20 years ago is called Cleaning Out My Closet. Okay, so one of the suggestions that I could make to you, I've done lots of training with students and so on, and with student bodies and student unions and student representatives. One of the biggest things that I could honestly recommend to you as young people, everybody's younger than me, so it's okay for me to say young people, is to what I call clean out your closet. What do I mean by that? Okay, this young fella here, this is from summer last year. He's a cricketer. I'm not a cricket fan. I know very little about it, but my ears did pick up whenever I heard of this here. This young man here, Ollie Robinson, was making his debut for England in cricket. And while he was out on the pitch, people were out raking over his social media and finding things that were, shall we say, didn't cover himself in glory from his younger days. And we've seen a number of these here. He actually ended up having to, I'm not going to read it out to you, but there was racist stuff in there, there was sexist stuff in there, all of the stuff, I wouldn't say all of the stuff, no excuse for it, but the sorts of stuff that very often young people do, unfortunately it come back to bite them, it come back to haunt them, So look, there's for that. And now I think all is good again, but there he was on one hand living the dream, and then the next suspended for his ancient history, effectively. Look, that is pretty much me done. I am going to give you some takeaways here. Look what I did there. Takeaways, eh? Very good, Damien. So what sort of takeaways do we have here? Oh, think twice before posting or sharing. Be careful around, the sources and stuff, that you're not sort of perpetuating misinformation or disinformation. Absolutely, do monitor social media content. I mean, this is particularly if you're an admin for a business. Monitor, moderate, and manage. Be careful about the law and the protocols, but it's the common sense stuff. Be really careful not to spread and amplify like fake news. Always remember, look, they really mean to say, how does this say? Sometimes if you say something out loud and say, here, that could be that could be misconstrued. Somebody like the picture of the peaches there. I have to say, they're pretty good. And look, do clean out that closet. And that is me. I'm happy to.
That's great.
Okay, I'm just right on, pretty much on cue, Laura. Look, I'm happy to field. I see there's loads of chats in there. But look, thanks everybody. Thank you, and look, honestly, thank you. That's nice feedback.
That's okay. All the chats. It's not really very many questions in there. It was all just sort of commenting on some of the slides that you'd shown, and lots of thank yous coming in now. But maybe if anybody does have anything that they want to ask you, we'll have a couple of minutes left. Feel free to put something in the chat box there if you wanted to. That was really brilliant, Damien. For me, I really enjoyed looking at some of those fails, and it's really
Thank you.
even getting you to start thinking about some of the things that you put on your own personal social media accounts. I think that's really
Well,
important to
that's
start
it.
thinking about that.